Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney. And on today's show, we're going to take a look at OMT, which is Open Media Transport, a new transport protocol with a bit more that vMix is introducing in their 29 beta release. And it really is I won't say competitor, but it's designed to sort of line up with the IP video segment of the market to transport video across local area networks or IP-based networks. So I want to sort of take a deeper look at this as a new component in vMix, and also sort of dig deeper behind the technical covers, as well as the positioning of OMT in the broader industry, the market for software providers, hardware providers, as well as the consumers. So a lot to get into in this one. But before we do that, I'd like to first invite everybody. If you have comments or questions, please just post them. We'll try to get to everything on the show here live. And I just want to put a little asterisk in everything. This is sort of a dynamic space right now where a lot of things are changing and evolving. So I will try to give you the best answers I can, but if there is a question mark or a caveat, I'll try to frame that in as well. So, hopefully this will at least give you a head start on looking at OMT. So let's just see. We have a few comments that have come in, so we'll start there. John Drinkwater. John, great to see you. Thank you for joining. So, Mike, great. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. So, Griswold Sports. Good to have you here, Griswold. Guy, I'm going to cover a lot of these different things. So that's a good question about, which works best for instant replay. So I'm going to sort of touch on these. Not necessarily the best, but I'll give you the sort of trade-offs on everything, and you can take it from there. Michael, great to see you here. Thanks for joining us, and glad you're looking forward to this. Guy, the quick answer is yes. OMT has the potential to do some really cool things in the industry, and we will definitely talk about that. But that's something, we'll keep the questions going through all of this, and hopefully we'll be able to get a bit more detail and a bigger sense of where the market's heading over the next few months. So thanks, Guy. Oh, Red Carpet Media, thank you for joining us. That's very, very nice to see you here. Mealdrug, sorry if I've said that wrong, but thank you for joining us from Romania. So yeah, hopefully we'll cover the things you need. So, Galson 24 TV. Galson, thank you for joining us here. William, thank you. Always good to see you, William. Appreciate you dropping in. Michael's asking about stability, support from vendors besides Neural. So yeah, we'll see where all this goes, but I'll be demoing this. So as part of the show, I will show you sort of OMT and NDI side by side, and hopefully we'll get some insight from what we see there. So you demand, good to see you. Thanks for joining. All right. So we sort of touched on a lot with the introduction, but let me sort of just take a step back, because I want to make sure we sort of jump in this with decent context. So OMT was introduced in vMix 29 as one of the new transport options. In addition to NDI, there's now OMT, and one of the key differentiators, just in a philosophical framework, is that OMT is fully open sourced. And Martin Sinclair from vMix has made a point, like during his presentation at IBC, of stating that this is sort of royalty-free, license-free, open source. So they're very committed to sort of making this a general standard. NDI is slightly different. NDI is what's called open license. So the features, functionality, and rules around using NDI are still controlled by vizrt. So it isn't an open source product. Open license means that for the consumer, for the user, and in certain software producer cases, it is still provided free of charge. But there's nothing that any software developer can go in to do to modify or extend what NDI does. That is fully controlled by Viz. So I think that's sort of just a philosophical difference now that's between these two protocols. But they do many of the same things in terms of, at least aspirationally, they do many of the same things. They both have the ability to discover sources on a local network. They both use, codecs for compression and decompression, as well as wrapping that in a transport layer for getting those packaged video, audio, media packets from one place to another. So a lot of similarities from technical and aspirational goals, but difference more in the business packaging and source code availability side. So we'll start with that. And I guess what I probably like to do, let me sort of jump in here and let's look at some slides I put together. So we'll sort of start there and talk a bit about this detail. So for OMT, as I mentioned, it's, free and open source. You can get multiple high definition feeds over a standard gigabit network. And this is one of the areas where, again, it differs from vizrt's NDI. With OMT, it right now, even though it is in theory codec agnostic, it ships with vMix's vMX codec. And as a part of this, the folks from vMix have open sourced vMX as well. So that is now part of the package that you get as a codec. So there aren't any encumbrances on the codec either for using this. And the thing about the vMX codec is that it is very CPU friendly, but it demands more bandwidth. And so what you can do with vMX is you can assign different bit rates, or it has a high, medium, and low bit rate versions, and the quality sort of migrates with that. Whereas NDI is much more built around sophisticated codecs, but those codecs require more processing to pack and unpack video. So that's sort of the trade. And that's what I mentioned here in the last one is it's a low latency codec and, effectively CPU friendly. It is also available on Windows, Mac, and Linux. If you are a developer and you're looking at any of those platforms, there is a code base there that will let you run it. And it is, designed to run on commodity hardware because to a large extent, some of these components are things that are native in vMix. So even though it's a new standard, things like vMX, that's been a part of vMix for their instant replay system for a long time. So it has a lot of real industry miles under it, shall I say. And that's something I think that's really important to consider. So let's look a little bit about the features. And this, we know a lot about how NDI works, and, this will give you sort of a comparable view. So it uses a DNS-based service discovery, which is an official protocol, which uses effectively a lot of the same conceptual elements and even some of the same technical ones as MDNS, which is what NDI uses for service discovery. We've already talked about the vMX codec, and that is TCP-based. So being TCP-based, it has pluses and minuses. So TCP is really ubiquitous. It's a high reliability protocol. The real downside to TCP is when things go bad. TCP guarantees that if a packet is sent, it gets delivered. That's a good thing, unless you're looking at it in the context of a problem and video. If you think about it, a packet with video in it has a very short shelf life. So if you had a significant network outage or delay or data overload of some kind, with TCP, even though there are all these video packets that are well past their usefulness, that you're not going to show it, you just had an interruption, TCP is still going to try to get those across. So it has no way of sort of pruning by time packets that shouldn't be delivered. And so this is sort of the downside. It's the strength and weakness there. As I mentioned, it has different bit rates, which is really bandwidth support, so high, medium, and low. Based on our use of it, we don't see much difference between high and medium in terms of visual quality. Low, you can see more artifacting, but again, based on the type of content, a talking head, a show like this, you probably wouldn't notice the difference between high and low, even maybe an occasional artifact. And especially if you're dealing, like in our case, where we're dealing with people that are coming in over low bandwidth connections already, of people coming in from Zoom or they're coming in from WebRTC, any of those feeds, so sort of remote guest style feeds, those will typically be pretty much okay with any of those bit rates because they are in their own structure, low bit rate feeds. One of the other things which I thought was really cool is that you do get 32 audio channels inside of the OMT packaging, as well as a timestamp metadata channel. So that means you can, this whole metadata and sort of bidirectional communications means that you can do things, even though it's not there right now. You can do things like remote camera control or packaging other types of production metadata and tagging and timestamps and other things with the data that you're sending across it. So that's nice. It also works with 8 or 16-bit color space. And at least from my understanding of vMix, it's pretty smart about this. So if you are starting out communicating over a 16-bit color space, but the data set it's getting is only 8-bit, it'll be adaptive and sort of try to save on bandwidth by just using the 8-bit instead of the 16-bit. So again, this is very early, but there could be some cool things with that. And the other thing, because somebody mentioned about different use cases, alpha support is included with vMix. So OMT gets that sort of natively here. And that means that anything like CG, remote graphics, or other things, that's all supported. And we'll show that in the demo we do here as well. So enough of the slides. I'm going to jump over now to vMix, and we will sort of look at how this implementation has been set up, and then we'll go and jump into a demo here. So in the vMix UI, there are only a few small things that you're going to see here that will be changes to how vMix works. There are a lot of changes, a lot of really cool stuff in vMix 29. And you'll notice like there's 8 overlays now. There are, different buttons and a different structural layout. So some cool things in it beyond this, but just focusing on this. The two things you'll see is that for inputs, if I want to add an input, and we'll do this here, you now see that they have NDI, OMT, and desktop capture. So if I select here, what you'll see are all the feeds on my network that are both NDI and OMT, but I could turn this off. So if I just wanted to see, these are the OMT feeds that I actually have coming in, and these would be the NDI feeds that I have. So you have the ability to pick both of them, either of them, and to sort of filter by which one you want to pick. But that's it. So you'd pick this the exact same way that you would pick a NDI feed. So from the vMix side, slightly more options here, but if you didn't, if you didn't see this any differently, you would just see NDI and OMT sources, with the only differentiator being this little icon in the lower left corner. Not sure you can see that, but it just says NDI or OMT. So that's the only real difference you have on the input side for adding inputs. The other difference that you have is over in the outputs. So if you come over here, you now says NDI, OMT, and SRT. So here, for each one of the outputs, you can set up, turn on NDI and OMT and SRT. And if you go in and look at this gear, which sort of gives you the options for the outputs, they now have, different things for the audio. You have, and this is an important differentiator, you can set the quality, which is effectively setting the bit rate that you want to output OMT. So when it says it's default, what this will mean is that a receiver, if you've advertised that I have this NDI or this OMT output in vMix, the receiver can come and say, I'd like the high bandwidth, or I'd like the medium bandwidth, or I'd like the low bandwidth. And it will just give the receiver that bandwidth. But default, if everybody says, just give me the default, that will be medium setting. And in medium setting, the bandwidth required for NDI and OMT are roughly equivalent, in terms of the load on your network and the network card that you're sending it to. So this just gives you that, but you can have low, medium, and high, and you could set it so you're only delivering a certain type. And there's another, which is technically there, but you don't see it here in the settings, which is thumbnail. So you can actually request a thumbnail feed, which is, I think it's like 240 by 160, something like that. So it's a very low, but it's great if you want to put some sort of multi-view together or things with these little sort of thumbnails like you see inside of vMix. That's an excellent way to pull those in with negligible bandwidth and negligible load on the CPU. So that's really it. You can set up OMT for outputs for any of the four, if you're in vMix 4K or Pro, and you can pull in OMT on any of the inputs. But those are the only real structural differences that we have here. So now that we're over in vMix, let me tell you a little bit about what I set up. So actually, let me just switch over to my other screen here for LiveToAirZ. And so one of the things that we have added that we'll be releasing shortly, but is still pre-release, is we've added OMT video and audio to our options for outputs. So you can now say for any one of the channels, which you can assign Zoom guests to, I want NDI and I also want OMT, or one or the other. So you can set it up either way. And that means that, and the reason we're doing it this way for this test is that I can take the same channel and take an NDI feed and an OMT feed and look at them side by side. And that's the way we've set up the test I'm going to show you inside of vMix. But before I get there, I know we've had a lot of questions, so I just want to jump in and get a few more comments in here. Okay, TV216, thank you for joining. I appreciate it. So, Danny, thank you. Hopefully you find this interesting. So Eric, thank you for joining from the UK. Thank you for spending your Friday evening with us. I definitely appreciate that. So, yeah, Michael, yeah, OMT has the potential to bring a lot of new possibilities to the IP video space. So we'll definitely, I agree with you. It would be nice to see this develop out into something, a broader ecosystem. So Otis, thank you for joining from Houston. I definitely appreciate it. So guys asking, with NDI, do developers have to pay for higher color space bit depth? I'm not 100% sure what was included and what wasn't. I know that there were two SDKs in NDI. There is the general SDK, and then there is the advanced SDK. The advanced SDK lets you do different things around uh, access to sort of some of the underlying components. It lets you change bit rates and other elements inside of NDI, which you can't do with the normal API. I believe that HDR and color space were both part of the advanced SDK, the higher color space, bit depth color space. But as far as I know, that is not true for the consumer side. So if you just have every version of NDI that a consumer uses, any consumer of NDI content, software-wise, will be able to take in whatever is made available from the provider, the sender of NDI. But I believe that to be a sender, you needed to have a for-fee license that added an extra charge to whatever products you shipped. And there isn't a clear single sort of price sheet for this. So I believe that different vendors have negotiated different arrangements with Viz over this. Again, we're not part of that, so I don't want to speak for any of the participants in the advanced SDK or sort of the SDK for hardware providers. But I do know that there is a for-fee arrangement for those features. So, okay. So, Tom, good to see you. Thanks for joining here. So, Michael's saying, if I had two vMix PCs, which before maybe struggled a little using NDI, would it be better with bandwidth using OMT? So, there's a lot we've tested and a lot we haven't here. So, in theory, the answer to this is if the reason they struggled is because of CPU loading and what it took to process the encoding and decoding of those streams between the two systems, then OMT should help. If it were bandwidth related, it's possible that the ability to use lower bandwidth tiers could help. But if that impacted the quality, then you will potentially have higher bandwidth loads. So if it's just one or two feeds, probably not a big deal. But if there were a lot more feeds that you were shipping between them, that potentially could be. Sorry, it's such a vague answer, but that's probably the closest I could come in, describing, the potential for how this could impact things. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'm finding out as right before the show. So there's a lot more thinking I still have to do on all of this. Thanks, John. So OMT as a vMix call. The quick answer is it really isn't designed for that at the current moment. OMT right now is a local network protocol. So it's only for sort of point-to-point on a local network. So it doesn't have the ability to traverse across networks. That being said, so to put this in a comparative way, neither there's NDI really. NDI bridge presents NDI at the edges and using compression and decompression, encoding and decoding, transports that stream over a wide area friendly protocol and presents it as NDI on the other side. But if you really think about it in the construct of the full pipeline, the middle piece is opaque. it isn't really NDI per se. You just couldn't hook a machine to that network and do anything with it. You need a bridge on the other side to sort of work between them. And they've done a lot to simplify that. They have like bridge as a service and things like that in NDI 6 that have come out. So there are other elements that simplify that wide area thing, but it isn't like an inherent capability of NDI. It's simply a freely available tool in the NDI ecosystem that allows you to do that sort of transport and remote discovery, with networks. And it is a very sophisticated and very nice wide area implementation that makes NDI use fairly transparent over the internet. But so right now, it won't do anything really to help with vMix call with what's there today. So Chandra, thank you for joining. I am glad you I'm glad you watched the show, and yeah, I did see the email, so I'll see what I could tell you about possible ways to deal with that. So Wolfgang, always good to see you. Thank you for joining here. Okay, so Warren is asking about how this is incorporated into NDI screen capture. So I will touch on this, but there is an OMT screen capture tool that has been released as part of the free tools that are available in the GitHub section with OMT. So that is downloadable. This is basically, again, the folks from vMix have I think seeded a lot of these things to get started. I'll talk more about the tools after, but there are screen captures for OMT as well. So PTZ control. PTZ control is not part of what's there right now, and neither is KVM. So, but again, this is because this is open source. I can see the possibility that a lot of these things are going to become available. And specifically, because I mentioned it has a metadata channel that's a part of, and timestamp metadata, so like clocked metadata. You have the ability to implement these things. So it's really going to be a question of, will the open source community pick that up and start to create these tools? But there's also a lot of commercial providers that are doing this. So, I know that Sienna has released a whole set of tools for the Mac, all using OMT. And Central Control has also, released a signal generator for OMT. So I expect there's going to be more of this as people start to, wrap their heads around what they can do with OMT. And, again, this is something we'll see hopefully develop over the next, year. And, this will be a good sort of assessment point probably for where OMT is and the progress it's making. So Cinco, thank you for joining. And again, for spending your Friday night with us. I appreciate it. So Otis is saying he's currently outputting vMix into an encoder, then into a network switch, and out to 10 decoders. Would OMT eliminate the need for my encoder into the network switch? I'm not sure of this yet. So what OMT does is TCP. So TCP is peer-to-peer. So everybody that connects is going to get an individual feed. So it's not like a multicast protocol right now. That's not in there. So I don't think it's going to specifically help on the number of encodes and decodes that you need to do. But if it is a lighter weight encode and decode, it could mean that you would be able to either in software or, if somebody came out with hardware, have lower end tools that would let you do that encode and decode into your switch. So again, still a little early for, how this could play out, but it is definitely open some possibilities. And the fact it's open source means that uh, somebody could actually take and build, sort of a mini PC or any of the, developer boards that are out there and implement this in something like a Raspberry Pi and create a fairly low cost converter adapter. And because there's no licensing associated with that, this could be something that is just released open source, or it could be something that is packaged but at lower cost because it requires less compute and no licensing. So some possibilities for how that could play out, but I don't really have a good answer for you with, where this will be with your immediate needs, but it's not something it could probably help right now. I have not built an OMT output box. So Cinco was asking this, but I believe that, and I believe that Martin Sinclair, who actually is sort of the owner of the project on GitHub for OMT, that they have released code for the Raspberry Pi and have been sort of showcasing a small box with an HDMI in and power over Ethernet that does encodes and decodes for OMT. So though I haven't built one, I believe the code is there. And if there are hobbyists or people that would want to pick that code base up and run with it for commercial purposes, I believe that is an option. Again, I always ask you to check licensing and everything else, with any software you download or any code you use to see what you can and can't do with it. But I believe that's available on GitHub right now. So, Chandra, you're quite welcome. So, So, Guy, thank you. Yeah, that's what I was saying. That there are, encoder and decoder apps there for Raspberry Pi. So I think, and this is really the interesting thing. Once something is open source, and the community doesn't just have to invest themselves in it as sort of users of a tool, but now it opens up possibilities for different deployments, different styles of implementation. And in, the true open source, ethos, having the best ideas in the community, albeit sort of curated by people that are handling the main open source body, becoming something that these new features can now move in fairly quickly into the core code base. So, Michael's asking, as vMix can output NDI directly, why would you need an encoder for NDI HX or something? So, yes, as far as I know, and I'm not speaking for anybody on the vMix side with this, vMix currently doesn't seem to be using the advanced SDK, so they don't have the ability to do sort of lower bandwidth NDI feeds. At least that, from here they seem like everything is full bandwidth NDI. So if you needed to do something lower bandwidth, you would need to re-encode that. And that's just something that this makes sense. For most people in the software space, working with full bandwidth NDI is fine. But in the converter space, things like Raspberry Pi, that's where having those lower bandwidths could be valuable. And also, frankly, for things like us, and what attracted us to OMT is that with LiveToAirZ, I mean, we could have up to 16 Zoom guests that could potentially, even more theoretically, but be fed out of a box. And the fact that there is sort of a low bandwidth option in OMT means that I could do a connection between LiveToAirZ and vMix with 16 Zoom guest feeds going into the vMix system and still not saturating a 1 gig network. So, really interesting things. And like I mentioned, when you are just dealing with what are already heavily encoded source feeds, from remote guests, whether it's WebRTC or Zoom, you're not losing in any significant way around quality. So it works very well in those styles of productions. So, but that having that variable encoding could be valuable to people. And if you're doing it with NDI and you're using the standard SDK, not the advanced, the only option is an external transcoder of some kind that can go from one codec wrapper to another. Yep. So totally got you, Tom. That seems like a very cool thing, the Pi box. So you're welcome, Cinco. This Michael's asking about getting OMT embedded into LiveToAirZ, and I'm not the developer, so I am not going to begin to speak with this with any level of authority. But I can say that from the point we downloaded the code to we had a working version where we send it out was actually, probably under a week. And from there, it's just been, hardening and rounding things out and trying to make sure all the extra things that, need to be done around making it production ready were included. But if somebody has already worked with NDI on a technical coding level, OMT probably won't be presenting new structures or new paradigms or new workflows in the code that you'd have to accommodate. So it probably should be a fairly natural addition to code if you're already invested in integrating NDI. But again, I'm not the developer, so I'm not going to speak for that, the complexity on that end at all. Otis, you're quite welcome. Guys saying NDI Bridge would be a tool to go from vMix's full NDI to NDI HX for something like a cheap Zoe box. Yes. So NDI Bridge has 3 different modes that it can run. It can be a host, it can be a receiver, or it can be a transcoder. And so when you set it up, you can turn around and say, I want to take your feeds in on a local network, and then on this box, I simply want to transcode them and republish them out using HX and with different, bandwidth selections that you can, latency and bandwidth things that you can put into NDI Bridge. So this gives you a way to do that. So you can move, to cheaper decoders if you had another box on the network with Bridge doing that transcoding. Okay, so a lot of good questions. I love this. So let me actually start to do a little bit of a demo here. And so let's see. Hold on a second. Okay, so here I have a feed that's coming out, and this is coming out from LiveToAirZ into vMix, and that's what I'm showing here. So this is OMT being fed from LiveToAirZ into vMix. Now, I don't have a label on this, but I'm going to switch over to NDI now. And so this is the NDI feed that I have that's coming in. And what you'll probably notice is you didn't really notice much. And that's because if we sort of look at them side by side, give me a second. So in looking at them side by side, you can see that they are fairly similar. You may see certain slight variations in color, but color matching looks really pretty good to my eye. This wouldn't be something where you sit there and go, oh, these are like from 2 different cameras. And I thought that was, definitely, a clearly valuable element that you can mix this into your productions without having any type of glaring differences. And a good way to look at this, and this is, I think, is I'm going to show you this on a split. So I'm just going to pull these two together. And now what you're seeing is so it's your view, the left half of this is OMT and the right half of this is NDI. And so it's the same feed coming out of LiveToAirZ, coming over OMT and NDI simultaneously. So as you can see, and I'll sort of switch back to the side-by-side view, and you can sort of see this. If you looked at them and I didn't tell you that this was coming, you would see an occasional bit of tearing up the middle where, they could drift slightly out of sync and come together. But I mean, considering these are coming in through two distinct pathways and just being composited, you're not looking at this and saying, wow, that looks like two totally different signals. And the synchronization is really tight. So you're not sitting there seeing continuous tearing. So I thought, those things, which I think are really cool to show, are very important to consider. And like I said, color, from the left to the right, you're not sitting here going, clearly the color space gives away the two halves. You don't see that at all. So this is the two side by side in a split view. And like I said, you can see the tearing that takes place between them. But by and large, I was really impressed with, how this looks. The other thing that I mentioned is that it does work with alpha. So I'm just going to put the LiveToAirZ. Oh, sorry about that. See if I got this set up. I probably changed some stuff here. So I'm not going to worry about it, but it also works with alpha channel. And I can, I'd be happy to go over that, again, later in the, in the post show. But so you can use this for things like graphics displays. So if you wanted to use one system for handling graphics and have that, be an input into another vMix system and just do those overlays, that's all available. So I think, that's sort of the extent of the demo, but I want to make sure that you sort of see this, see the strengths and weaknesses, but sort of see it in a practical, if I were using this, would this work for me? And I think that's what I'm trying to demonstrate with this here. So let me jump in because I do have a few more things I want to talk about, specifically around bandwidth. And so let me see here. And so I'm going to put up the slides. I'm going to start with NDI bandwidth. And now what I'm showing here is NDI full bandwidth, high bandwidth NDI. And the reason I'm showing that is that most software that is deployed from developers that are not using the advanced SDK, these are the numbers that you would expect. Basically, running from 720p 60, up to 4K 60. And so just sort of looking at this in general terms, you're like at 100 megabits for 720, 120 for 30, 1080 150 for 1080 60, 250 for 4K 30, and 300 for 4K 60. Just sort of take the general high numbers here. Now, if I were to start to break this down and look at it around OMT, I set these up as the two as different resolutions. And you can see that, for 720, where before I was like 100 at 720p 60, I'm at like 140 on, the high resolution. But again, as a developer looking at this without having the advanced SDK, it does mean that I have options to deliver at lower bandwidth around 720. So 68 and then the low is 45. So this places it, somewhere, in the, 40% to 50% lower if I'm able to use these bitrate settings versus the NDI high bandwidth. And again, I'm talking about this in comparison for what a lot of the software that's available can do. For 1080, it becomes more stark with the differences. I mean, what you are looking at here is the 1080 bandwidth at the high end bandwidth is about what the 4K bandwidth ratings are in NDI full bandwidth. Again, lighter compression, but also again the ability to adjust on the bandwidths for both of these. So I think you're starting to see the sort of the trend here for 1080p for 2160 60p. You are dealing with almost 600 megabits per second, and even at medium, you're 400 megabits per second. So these are very demanding. This means that at 4K 60, you are looking at medium resolution 2 feeds on a 1 gigabit network versus high, which is really just 1 feed on a gigabit network. But you also have the ability to go to 200, and if the quality is there for you, you can use that. So benefits and trade-offs, and I think that's sort of the theme I'm touching on with a lot of this stuff. The other thing is ecosystem, and we talk about the importance of ecosystem for a lot of things. So let's look at the tools. So we all know, I'm not even going to put up the NDI has the broadest set of tools out there with the broadest industry support. And the place before we even get it where NDI excels is with the hardware ecosystem that's out there. The fact that you have KiloView, BirdDog, Magewell, all of those are making converter devices for NDI with SDI and NDI as sort of different conversion stacks. AJA, I believe, has things for that, and they have bridge tools for that. So a lot of stuff, as well as all the software tools that are out there. But considering that this is sort of first released within the past couple of months, this is what's available. So the Windows tools that are available is there is a desktop capture for OMT. There is a viewer. Now the viewer is fairly limited. You can pick a source and you can view it, but doesn't have a lot of the things that you're used to, like Studio Monitor with NDI. But again, this is something that we'll see develop over time, if there's any sort of traction. It also has a matrix router, so the ability to, sort of take in a set of OMTs in and then publish a set of, OMT outs and be able to route an in to an out can give you that. And there's a settings manager, which controls things like what port ranges OMT, excuse me, what port ranges OMT would use and other things. But that's more of a geeky tool than, something you would use on a normal production level. And Joe DeMax over at Central Control has released an OMT signal generator, and I believe he showed that off in the vMix booth as well over at IBC, last month or earlier this month, actually. So there are some things there. And on the Mac side, Sienna has jumped in with both feet and released, really quality elements here around OMT for, monitor signal generator, scan converter, configuration manager. And the other thing I want to point out, and this is important, even though it's not part of what's like actively released, OMT does support a discovery server model. So you can, if you do not want to have sort of discovery via sort of public broadcast, a multicast with, what is it? The basically service discovery model that they're using. You can use a discovery server and get the benefit of sort of a preset mechanism for doing discovery. And again, in larger settings, that can be a big plus, and that's available technically in it, and via, on the Mac side, via the Sienna tools. So some definite cool stuff in here. So that's really, sort of the big overview. But there are some more industry focused things, that I want to talk about. So one of them is adoption. So if you look at who's looking at this, beyond like vMix putting it out, and I've talked about, the fact that we're adding it into LiveToAirZ, and, we'll definitely be considering putting it, scheduling it for inclusion in LiveToAir at some point. OBS now, which is sort of the other large open source community project in the video production space. It now supports OMT as well through plugins. And it really comes down to, where will this head over the next, several years, to be honest. It's a long-term play, and most standard adoptions are longer term. But the fact we have vMix and OBS both in anchor positions around OMT, it gives me some level of confidence that there's going to be broader interest by both software vendors, but also hardware vendors. And the reason I say that is the basic premise of OMT is very much aligned with, NDI and what NDI is able to do. And if you're making cameras or you're making converters, those tend to just live on a local network. So if I could plug a camera in and see that as OMT, that could be, certainly advantageous. And I could definitely see some vendors say, I can sell a camera with OMT at a different price point and make it upgradable for a fee to NDI as well. If they wanted to be able to reach a segment of the market and not charge the licensing fees for that. And again, people may not be using, OMT in the way that we would think of, a classic, a classic system. You may turn around and say OMT could be, could evolve into different things as an open source project. And we could see different capabilities that would make this attractive. And I'll give you for instance, maybe OMT will go in terms of configuration and source selection and things like that. Maybe they'll go to supporting a centralized model, very much like Dante, where it could be very attractive to AV installers, where they're sitting there going, I would love to have just one console where I could turn around and assign sources to all the different endpoints. That is something that very, very possible in NDI, but it would have to be something that VizRT thought was worthwhile introducing into that in a time frame that made sense to them commercially, because they purchased new tech and along with that NDI, and they have an investment in that, so they need to find some way to manage a return for that. Whereas an open source doesn't really have that. Open source is very much in service of the community that's embracing it. So you will get, I'm not saying NDI isn't, but it's a trade-off between commercials and giving the community whatever they want. Because face it, most people would say, I want everything and I don't want to pay anything. And that's a very normal consumer view. So, but it's finding the balance. In open source, it really is different. You are in that space where if you're willing to contribute and invest your skill into the community project, a lot of new things can come of that. And if it is curated effectively, the best of those things will sort of make it into the main thread, the main core of the open source project. And that opens up a lot of possibilities. So you could turn around and say, maybe camera manufacturers will want to do this because it would work differently in the AV space. And that could give them, different advantages there. And again, like I said, a lot of possibilities, but not a lot of answers. And I think that's an important point. We really don't know where this will evolve, but we know it has the ability to evolve and to be driven by things the community is interested in. And I think, if you look at it, the fundamental questions are, why is OMT here? And I think that is probably in large part because people became uncertain of, as certainly the development community, around licensing of NDI and what that will look like going forward. And having an open source alternative provided a viable commercial option for a lot of smaller developers and even some larger developers, where they looked and said, well, if I could not at some point afford NDI based on the price points and the distribution of my product, I would still have an IP-based video or media distribution capability that I could include with OMT. And I think that was really it. It was just uncertainty in the market, gave rise to, the release of OMT as an option. And I think, hopefully this is going to bring out the best in both protocols, that we'll see NDI sort of compete for, for mind share and, and look at it very much as, I need to earn the loyalty. And the same with OMT, where they'll come back and say, I need to be really responsive and I need to fill in the needs that I think I uniquely can solve, certainly in a given time frame. So it's going to be very interesting. And I think this is going to be great overall for the community. Regardless of how these things play, competition is always something that brings out the better side of any product or technology. So I'm really excited and looking forward to this. But the quick answer at the other end to the other question is, well, should I stick with NDI? Probably if you are invested in NDI and have workflows and technologies that are built around NDI as your production setup, then definitely, NDI has the more mature ecosystem and, a longer history with these, IP-based production workflows across the range of client bases. So definitely there's no reason to abandon that. But if you are looking for things that NDI does not provide, OMT may at some point be a solution for some of those things that you're going to need to deal with that maybe, it isn't on Viz's radar for adding to NDI. So that's pretty much a summary of everything I wanted to cover with this. And I know there's a ton of stuff, but hopefully this gives you at least a broad brush overview of where OMT fits in this universe and, what it delivers now and has the potential to deliver. Okay, so what I'd like to do, because we got, a lot of cool discussions going on here. So what I'm going to do is let's wrap up the main show and then we'll jump into the post show and we'll keep going with questions. I'll do my best to answer them as completely as I can. So thank you all. If you can stay for the post show, I really thank you for joining us for this show. And I will probably have another show, live show, in 2 to 3 weeks. I apologize. It's been sort of very, very busy here on a lot of different fronts with a lot of things that we're doing on the business side. So, it's my ability to just do a weekly show has really been curtailed just with all the commitments I have. But, 2 to 3 weeks, and I will, definitely be back with everybody. And if I don't see you in the post show, be safe, be well, and I will see you in 3 weeks. Otherwise, I'll see you in a minute. Take care. All right, welcome to the post show. this has been a fun show. A lot of great questions going on here. So I love these types of discussions. So Michael is saying it looks like OMT is more and more bandwidth hungry, the higher resolutions. And so as productions move to slowly moves to 4K, could that be a potential deal breaker? But yeah, I mean, so let's talk about that. One of the things that came out when OMT was released is that it is not bound to a specific codec, but in the interest of launching this out to, the public, to basically make this a viable initial release, vMix contributed the vMX protocol, the vMX codec. Excuse me, the vMX codec to the open source along with OMT, and it is what you're seeing is really with bandwidth is related specifically to the vMX protocol, but OMT is not protocol bound. Like NDI uses the Speed HQ protocol, which was developed a long time ago for a product that NewTek released called Speed Edit, which was a fantastic product. Love that product, but that sort of went to the wayside, never went to HD. But anyway, that long story. But Speed HQ has been around a long time, and that is something that is sort of fixed with NDI. You get that. And that's sort of the universe it lives in. And Speed HQ is built on other things as well, but you don't have that tighter binding with OMT. So you could definitely have OMT instances that could negotiate protocol. And the challenge with most codecs is that they're not open source. So what I would probably see is seeing something like AV1, which in theory is, though there's been some legal challenges here and there, when Google sort of released that as part of Chrome, that made that open source. So that is a sort of a encoder decoder could be a possibility that could, sort of be a different balance where you could say I have vMX and I have AV1. But I think in order to make an open source product viable, all of the components in it need to sort of respect the open source ethos. It doesn't mean that you couldn't build products which use H.264 or H.265 or potentially other codecs, but you would then potentially have different licensing constraints that could be placed on that, and what you could do, where you could ship it, other things, and the value of open source is keeping all of it in that space. But OMT itself is not codec limited, so you could find that this could be settled or resolved by a broader codec support in the open source space. And that's something that definitely could be closer on the near term horizon, but we'll definitely have to see. So yeah, I mean the OMT it definitely is pretty cool. I'll be honest, Guy, one of the things, I mean, and we talked about this, though we don't really see this as likely. One of the things we would definitely love is if Blackmagic would consider sort of integrating OMT as part of their, it's SMPTE 2110 for their higher end distribution options for local distribution, and OMT for their lower end distribution options. But if somewhere along the line they could be convinced to bring OMT into the fold, I think that could bring a lot of good things to the community in terms of, both for Blackmagic, where while I definitely get where they're coming from, having a option that can work on native network infrastructure, gigabit networks, I think would be a true win for them, on the, especially on all the lower MA10 lines. So, yep, but that is something, SDI to OMT, you can do all that with OBS right now, and that would be great. So, Michael's asking if vMix goes after Dante Ordinate for audio in vMix 32. I have to say this. I think Dante is something that's very specific. It does deal with audio, but their integration into hardware is really sort of the core of their distribution. I mean, they have Dante Virtual Sound Card, and that's available for the the software side. But in terms of just Dante embedded with their like Brooklyn chip and other things that they have for for hardware developers, that's their strength. So you're dealing with a very tight hardware ecosystem where you have like Yamaha mixes and Rio breakout boxes where you can sort of sit there and go, I have a DM3 D and a Rio 16 port distribution box, connected by a network cable. That's where Dante shines. Plus everything they've done with clocking, really has that hardware dependency where there is some sort of, by and large, for almost any professional space that has a hardware clock for Dante somewhere, either in the mixer or outside, but something that's standard with a primary and secondary networks and failovers and all that stuff. So a lot of cool hardware stuff built into Dante. So not sure that will move, that sort of capability will move completely over to software. But also the audio latency is in many ways much more noticeable, and drops and everything else. You hear that right away, whereas video can actually, even though it's higher bandwidth, can be more forgiving with drops. All right, so Guy, yes, SRT minis. I'm not. I didn't deliberately leave anybody out. Yeah, I mean, SRT mini server is exceptionally cool, and getting OMT support in this, I think what you're probably seeing is a lot of the smaller developers in the ecosystem, like ourselves. We're not pretending to be, a massive influential developer in that sense, but I think you're going to see a lot of smaller developers adopting OMT. The fact you have both vMix and OBS supporting OMT now, I think it's for the ecosystem to sort of take that next leap forward. It's really going to take probably a camera manufacturer to add that as an option. And then I think there's going to be a real momentum build behind OMT. And like I said, I would love to see that competition in the marketplace, because I think it'll be better products both on the OMT and the NDI side. So looking forward to that. So let's see. Will Bird Dog have a shot at OMT in the encoder decoder? So I would say something. I have not verified anything, but I have heard, and I'll classify this purely as rumor, that there was at least questions coming from them on, on some of the forums that on Reddit that were discussing this, like video engineering. I'm not sure if that was the forum. So I think, I'm not speaking for them at all, but I think most manufacturers would at least be looking at this and making a decision on does this add value to our business? Will we be able to sell more product if we were to integrate this? Because it is an investment, it is support, and so that's something where I think a lot of these players could look and say it doesn't mean abandoning NDI. It could simply be in the same way that most cameras now have SRT and NDI if they provide an IP option. So you can still do, multiple protocols from a camera. So I think if these move into cameras or encoders and decoders, they'll probably move in as an addition to, and that way there's no bridges burned, and it's something if it's cost effective to do, then that will probably be something that we will see. And again, it's like I said, a lot of unknowns in all of this, but I do think across the board there is interest in understanding more about what the possibilities are. So, William, yeah, I thought this was going to be an interesting show, but I agree with you that there are a ton of questions coming up here, and that's really refreshing. I love seeing that sort of engagement on something which I think is has a significant potential impact, and that people definitely should be at least paying attention to. So thank you. All right. So Bose Promo TV. He's saying that Switcher Studio invented, a protocol to get iPhones back to iOS devices like an iPad, to get video back from them. Yeah, I am curious. I mean, because there's probably a lot here, and I think as a small software company, you always look at things in two lenses. One is what investments can I make that enhance my products, and what are the most cost-effective ways to make those enhancements? So if the protocol, the codec, the transport is the unique advantage for Switcher Studio, then OMT probably is not going to be something that they would necessarily embrace, because it doesn't add a unique value, and could compromise what they would see as something that's uniquely their value. And I think that's true for everyone. If your value is in, the capabilities, the workflow, the interface design, those types of things that are unique in your product, then that's, you could turn around and say, if I don't have to develop other protocols, that's great, because we're not going to win by developing those protocols. It's just an added burden for us, and we could move faster on the things that uniquely set us apart. So I think that's sort of what goes on in every development shop's head, is what investments do I make in technology that are expenses, and what investments do I make in technology that are assets? And if I can offload the expenses to different things that are not adding to my asset pool, then that is something they would all consider. So, yeah, William is mentioning, that Dante seems like a good solution for a new installation, but cost prohibitive for a gradual incorporation. Yeah, I think Dante is starting to find ways to extend their footprint. So I know there's a new company out, I think it's called Turtle, that has a lot of Dante-enabled products. And, that was actually started by a former co-founder of BirdDog, which, we just spoke about. So I do think that for Dante, there are things that they could do. And if you're like an AV shop, there are ways that you could retrofit a lot of different things. You may not be getting rid of your mixers, but you may turn around and say, I could take and plug in, Avio adapters, which are made by Ordinate and other companies, the little analog to Dante adapters that I could put in so I could use my current mixer, but maybe I'll take 4 or 6 of the aux outs and feed those out as Dante, which I could let me do speakers in different rooms and things of that sort. So there are different things that you can do incrementally to move into the Dante ecosystem, even if you are more analog right now, and sort of decide, where does Dante add value? And value can be a lot of different things. There's technical value, but there's also sort of setup value. If I can turn around and say, I can run one Cat6 cable from my mixer board to a room instead of running heavy rolls of XLR cables to different rooms to set up speakers, and that impacts setup, crew, all the other things that sort of go with that. So there are different ways that costs can factor in based on how you're doing these deployments. But I do think there are gradual ways. But I agree with you completely that if you're doing a new studio installation, you're either going embedded or you probably would be wise to use Dante. I just think the benefits are really compelling. So, all right. So, James, thank you. I'm glad you found this useful. It was something I really wanted to cover when I saw it come out. So I'm glad we got the show together. All right. Let's see. All right. So I don't know. Let's see. Okay. I think we probably have covered a lot here, and so sort of to wrap this up. First, thanks to all of you. This has been a lot of fun for me to be doing this show with all of you. I have tried to speak as accurately as I can about things, but that said, there could be things that I've misunderstood in terms of how all this works, or things that are changing as I speak, so might not be as accurate, by this time next week. But hopefully, this at least will give you a framework to start to assess what OMT could portend for the products and the workflows that you have today. And hopefully this is something that we'll be able to follow up on again shortly with, some maybe bigger announcements by different media players in the space. I'm really excited by this. That we've been big fans of NDI, and we use it in almost everything that we produce, and it's in all of our products. So I don't take this as anything but I'm happy to see competition, which can spur innovation, which can be something that's better for everybody here. And that's really where all of this, what you see, the excitement in me coming from, that's really where it's coming from. I think this is going to be good for everyone, no matter which of these technologies you would consider using. So thank you, everyone. Bill, thank you for joining. John, thanks. Hopefully, this is something that, you can leverage in a lot of the stuff you do, because I know, you are very involved in the Zoom community and everything else there. So this is, it's been fun having you here. Michael, thank you. I appreciate that. Anything we do, Bose promo, thank you. You're very welcome for this. Mike, thank you. A lot of information going around. So Tom, thank you. Hopefully this this serves a lot of people in your community as well. So, all right. Yeah, and Tom, Tom has Streaming Idiots, which is a phenomenal show, by the way. So please, I appreciate everything that Tom does for this community, and definitely check him out. He covers a lot of topics like this with a lot of very cool guests on as well. So thanks, everybody. So until our next show, be safe, be well. I'll see you then.